The salt-heavy wind whipped across Naval Base Coronado, carrying with it the sharp bark of commands and the rhythmic thud of boots on asphalt. It was 0600 hours on a gray March morning in San Diego, California, and the K-9 training facility was already alive with controlled chaos. Handlers moved between kennels with practice efficiency, their German shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Dutch shepherds responding to every gesture with military precision, except for one. Kennel 47 stood isolated at the far end of the facility, separated from the others by a 50-foot buffer zone that everyone had learned to respect. Inside, a massive German shepherd named Rex paced with predatory intensity, his dark coat rippling over taut muscles as he moved. His eyes, an unsettling amber that seemed to glow in the dim morning light, tracked every movement beyond the reinforced steel bars. Master Chief Petty Officer Daniel Garrett stood 30 feet away, arms crossed, his weathered face set in a deep frown. At 52, he'd spent 3 decades training military working dogs, and he'd never encountered an animal like Rex. The dog had arrived 6 months ago from an undisclosed government facility with minimal documentation, just a transfer order, a warning label marked "handled with extreme caution," and a veterinary file that raised more questions than it answered. "He's getting worse, Master Chief," said Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Thompson, a lean African-American man in his late 20s who'd been assigned as Rex's primary handler. Thompson had the scars to prove it. 3 stitches above his left eyebrow from when Rex had lunged at the kennel door 2 weeks prior, sending a metal fragment flying. Garrett nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off the animal. "How many handlers have we tried now?" 12, sir. Best in the facility. Rex won't respond to basic commands, won't accept food rewards, and shows aggression toward anyone who approaches within 15 feet. He's destroyed 4 leashes, 2 muzzles, and put Petty Officer Rodriguez in the infirmary last month. The incident with Rodriguez had been the breaking point for many. The experienced handler had attempted a standard approach: low voice, non-threatening posture, high-value treat in hand. Rex had seemed calm, almost docile, right up until Rodriguez reached the kennel latch. The dog had exploded into motion, slamming against the door with such force that it had partially buckled the frame. Rodriguez's arm had been caught between the bars, and Rex's jaws had closed around his forearm before 2 handlers could pull him free with catch poles. "What does a behavioral specialist say?" Garrett asked, though he already knew the answer. Thompson pulled out a worn notebook, flipping to a page covered in dense handwriting. Dr. Chun conducted 3 observation sessions. Her assessment is that Rex exhibits severe trust issues, possible PTSD indicators, and what she calls tactical hypervigilance. She believes he was trained for something beyond standard military working dog protocols. The way he assesses threats, his reaction time, the calculated nature of his aggression, it's not typical even for combat-trained K-9s. Garrett finally turned to face Thompson, and the younger man could see the weight of decision in his superior's eyes. "I've got Admiral Hutchins breathing down my neck. Son, we've invested 6 months and considerable resources trying to rehabilitate this animal. The brass wants results, or they want him decommissioned." The word hung in the air between them. Decommissioned, a clinical term that meant Rex would be euthanized, deemed too dangerous to adopt out, too unpredictable to serve. "There has to be something we're missing," Thompson said, his voice tight with frustration. "No dog comes out of the womb like this. Someone trained him, commanded him, controlled him. If we could just figure out what methods they used." "We've tried everything in the book and half the things that aren't," Garrett interrupted. "German commands check, Dutch. We've had trainers from 3 different agencies take a crack at him. Hell, we even brought in that civilian specialist from Los Angeles, the one who supposedly rehabilitates aggressive dogs for Hollywood. Rex put him flat on his ass without even touching him. The man just looked in those eyes and decided he valued his life more than his reputation." A sharp metallic clang echoed across the facility. Both men turned to see Rex standing on his hind legs, front paws against the kennel door, his lips pulled back to reveal formidable teeth. The sound had been his heavy paws striking the steel, a reminder that he was listening, watching, evaluating. "He's smart," Thompson observed quietly. "Too smart. It's like he understands everything we say." Intelligence in a dog like that is a liability, not an asset, Garrett replied. Not when it's paired with that level of aggression and zero trust in humans. The morning wore on, and the rest of the facility settled into its routine. Handlers ran their dogs through obstacle courses, practiced detection drills, and conducted obedience training. The sounds of barking, praise, and commands created a symphony of disciplined chaos. But Kennel 47 remained its own isolated world, where Rex continued his restless pacing and the humans kept their distance. By 1400 hours, Garrett had made his decision. He sat in his cramped office, surrounded by filing cabinets and framed photos of successful K-9 graduates, typing up the recommendation that would seal Rex's fate. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard as he reached the final paragraph. After 6 months of intensive rehabilitation efforts utilizing multiple handlers, training methodologies, and behavioral interventions, K-9 Rex, ID 47 to 2847, remains unsuitable for military service. The animal demonstrates persistent aggressive behaviors, refusal to accept handler authority, and poses a significant safety risk to personnel. It is this officer's recommendation that K-9 Rex be decommissioned effective immediately. Garrett's hand moved toward the mouse to finalize the report when his phone rang. The number displayed was from the front gate security. "Master Chief Garrett," he answered curtly. "Sir, this is Corporal Davies at Gate 3. I have a civilian here requesting access to the K-9 facility. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. Something about one of your dogs." Garrett rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. "Tell her to submit a formal request through the proper channels. We don't accept walk-ins." There was a pause, then muffled conversation in the background. "Sir," she's insisting. "Says her name is Sarah Mitchell, and that she needs to see the dog in Kennel 47. She says she knows him." The headache intensified. Garrett had dealt with enough civilians claiming to know military working dogs. Usually former owners try to reclaim pets they'd sold or abandoned, not understanding that these animals have been transformed by training into something entirely different. "I don't have time for this, Corporal." "Tell her." "Sir, she just showed me something. It's a photograph. Old one. Looks military. There's a German shepherd in it, and, Master Chief, the dog looks exactly like Rex." Garrett sat up straighter. "Keep her there. I'm coming down." He grabbed his cover and strode out his office, his boots echoing through the corridor. Thompson caught up with him halfway across the facility. "Master Chief, where are we going?" "Front gate. Apparently, we have a visitor who claims to know our problem child." They reached Gate 3 in Garrett's service vehicle, navigating through the sprawling base past administrative buildings, barracks, and training facilities. Coronado stretched out around them, the California sun finally breaking through the morning clouds to cast everything in harsh, unforgiving light. The woman waiting at the security checkpoint was not what Garrett expected. Sarah Mitchell appeared to be in her early 30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and wearing civilian clothes, worn jeans, a faded blue jacket, and hiking boots that had seen better days. Her face was pale, her eyes underscored with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. But it was her posture that caught Garrett's attention. Straight-backed, alert, with hands that rested naturally at her sides in a way that suggested military training. "Master Chief Garrett?" she asked, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. "That's right. You're Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes, sir." The sir came automatically, confirming his suspicion about her background. "Corporal Davies says you claim to know one of our K-9s. Let's see this photograph." She reached into her jacket slowly, aware of the armed guards watching her every move, and withdrew a plastic sleeve containing a faded photograph. She handed it to Garrett with hands that trembled slightly. The photograph was old, the colors slightly washed out, but the image was clear enough. It showed a younger woman in military uniform, Army. He noted, not Navy, kneeling beside a German shepherd puppy. The woman was unmistakably a younger version of Sarah Mitchell. And the puppy, even at that age, had distinctive markings and those same unsettling amber eyes. When was this taken? Garrett demanded. "For years ago. Fort Huachuca, Arizona. I was assigned to a classified training program. That sergeant, before they changed his name to Rex." Thompson leaned in to look at the photo, his eyes widening. You're saying you were his original handler? Not just his handler, Sarah replied, her voice dropping. I was his trainer. From 8 weeks old until he was 2 years old, I worked with him every single day. We were preparing for a program that... She hesitated. That doesn't officially exist. Garrett exchanged a glance with Thompson. Classified programs, undisclosed facilities, dogs trained beyond standard protocols. It was all starting to make a terrible kind of sense. Why are you here, Ms. Mitchell? Because I saw the decommission request in a shared database I still have limited access to. Her eyes met his directly, and he saw genuine fear there. Master Chief, you can't put him down. Rex isn't broken. He's doing exactly what I trained him to do. He doesn't trust anyone because he was trained not to. He's aggressive because he's waiting for a threat that he believes is always coming. And he won't respond to commands because... Because what? Garrett pressed. Because he only responds to one voice. Mine. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of jet engines from a nearby naval air station. Garrett studied the woman's face, looking for signs of delusion or deception. He found neither, only exhaustion, determination, and something that looked like guilt. That's impossible, Thompson said. Dogs can be retrained to accept new handlers. It's difficult with combat dogs, but it's done all the time. Not with Rex, Sarah insisted. Not with what he was trained for. Master Chief, please, just let me see him. 5 minutes. If I'm wrong, if he doesn't respond to me, then I'll leave, and you can do what you think is necessary. But if I'm right... She took a shaky breath. If I'm right, then Rex doesn't deserve to die for doing his job too well. Garrett's instincts warred with regulations. Everything about this situation screamed complications. Civilian access to a military facility, classified programs, a dangerous animal, and a woman who might be delusional or might be telling the truth. But something in her eyes, combined with that photograph and 6 months of failure, made him decide. Thompson, call Dr. Chun and have her meet us at Kennel 47. Ms. Mitchell, you're coming with us, but you follow my orders exactly. If at any point I determine you're a danger to yourself or my personnel, this ends immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you. They processed her through security, issued her a visitor's badge, and drove back to the K-9 facility in tense silence. Sarah stared out the window at the base, her expression unreadable. Garrett used the drive to make several quick calls, ensuring that additional personnel would be present for whatever was about to happen. By the time they arrived at Kennel 47, a small crowd had gathered Dr. Chun, the behavioral specialist, 3 handlers with catch poles, and 2 armed security personnel. Word had apparently spread quickly through the facility that something unusual was happening. Rex was immediately aware of the commotion. He stood at the front of his kennel, every muscle taut, his amber eyes fixed on the approaching group. A low growl emanated from deep in his chest, a sound that made even the experienced handler step back involuntarily. Everyone stay back, Garrett ordered. Ms. Mitchell, this is your show. But I'm telling you right now, if that dog makes one aggressive move toward you, we're intervening. Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. She walked forward slowly, stopping about 20 feet from the kennel. The growling intensified. Rex's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that had been maintained in perfect condition despite his behavioral issues. Remember, Dr. Chin said quietly from behind her, aggressive displays are preludes to... Sergeant, Sarah said. Just one word, firm but not loud, carrying a tone that somehow combined command and affection. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. Rex's growl cut off mid-breath. His ears, which had been flat against his skull, pricked forward. The aggressive posture melted away as he sat, his tail beginning a hesitant wag that picked up speed with each passing second. Holy shit, Thompson breathed. Sarah took another step forward. Sergeant down. Rex dropped to his belly, his tail now wagging furiously, a high-pitched whine of excitement replacing the menacing growl. It was the sound of a dog greeting someone it loved, someone it had been waiting for. Everyone stay back, Garrett repeated, but his voice had lost its edge of command and gained something closer to wonder. Sarah approached the kennel door, her movements confident now. "Sergeant, wait." The dog froze, every fiber of his being focused on the woman before him. Sarah reached for the latch, and every human present tensed, hands moving toward weapons and catch poles. The kennel door swung open. Rex didn't charge. He didn't attack. He crawled forward on his belly, maintaining the down position, until he reached Sarah's feet. Only then did he look up at her, and the transformation in those amber eyes was complete. From predator to devoted companion in the span of seconds. "Sergeant, break," Sarah said softly, and the dog surged upward, placing his front paws on her shoulders in a move that would have been threatening from any other dog, but was clearly a gesture of reunion. His tail wagged so hard his entire back end swayed, and he was making sound that fell somewhere between whimpers and cries of joy. Sarah wrapped her arms around a massive dog, burying her face in his fur, and her shoulders began to shake. It took Garrett a moment to realize she was crying. The facility fell silent except for the sound of woman and dog reunited, and every person present understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, and that nothing about the situation was going to be simple. The conference room at Naval Base Coronado was designed for strategic briefings, not emotional confrontations. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the gray walls decorated with naval insignia and operational maps. Master Chief Garrett sat at the head of a long table, with Dr. Chen to his right and Petty Officer Thompson to his left. Across from them, Sarah Mitchell perched on the edge of her chair, her hands wrapped around a disposable coffee cup that had long since gone cold. Rex lay at her feet in a perfect downstay, his amber eyes tracking everyone's movements but his body completely relaxed, a stark contrast to the aggressive animal that had terrorized the facility for 6 months. The transformation was so complete that 2 of the handlers who'd been present at the reunion had asked Garrett if he was certain it was the same dog. "Let's start from the beginning, Ms. Mitchell," Garrett said, activating a digital recorder on the table. "And I need you to understand that everything you say here will be documented and potentially reviewed by Navy intelligence, depending on what you tell us." Sarah nodded, taking a shaky breath. "I understand, Master Chief. But before I explain about Sergeant, about Rex, I need to know that what I tell you won't put him in more danger. I came here to save him, not to make things worse." "The only thing that was going to put that dog down was his behavior," Garrett replied bluntly. "You've demonstrated that his behavior is entirely dependent on your presence. That changes the equation, but I need to understand what we're dealing with." "Fair enough." Sarah set down her coffee cup and straightened her shoulders, and Garrett recognized the gesture. A soldier preparing to give a report. "My name is Sarah Mitchell, former specialist with the United States Army. I enlisted in 2018, and after basic training and completion of the military police school at Fort Leonard Wood, I was recruited for a specialized program." "What kind of program?" Dr. Chen asked, leaning forward with professional interest. "It was called K9 TAC, short for K9 Tactical Advanced Combat. The official story was that we were developing new training protocols for military working dogs in counterterrorism operations. The reality was more complicated." She paused, her hand unconsciously dropping to rest on Rex's head. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes half closing in contentment. Thompson pulled out his notebook. "I've never heard of K9 TC. You wouldn't have. It was a black-budget operation run jointly by Army Special Operations and a private defense contractor called Sentinel Dynamics. The program was based at Fort Huachuca, but we operated at several locations across Arizona and New Mexico." Garrett's expression hardened. Private defense contractors working with military assets often meant legal gray areas and ethical complications. What was the program's actual purpose? Sarah met his eyes directly. To create the perfect combat K9. Not just dogs that could detect explosives or track targets, but animals that could operate in the most hostile environments with minimal handler oversight. Dogs that could be deployed into situations where sending human operators was too risky. They wanted K9s that could think independently, make tactical decisions, and her voice dropped, eliminate threats on command. The room went silent. Dr. Chen's pen stopped mid-note. Thompson's face paled slightly. Garrett kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing through the implications. "You're describing attack dogs trained for autonomous lethal operations," Dr. Chin said carefully. "That's exactly what they were," Sarah confirmed. "The program recruited 12 handlers and 15 puppies. I was assigned a sergeant when he was 8 weeks old. For 2 years, every single day, I trained him. Basic obedience first, then aggression work, then tactical operations. We worked in simulated villages, abandoned buildings, even underground facilities. I taught him to identify threats based on weapons, body language, and my commands. I taught him to attack on command and to disengage on command. But you also taught him not to trust anyone else," Garrett said, the pieces falling into place. "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. That was part of the protocol. The handlers were told that trust in a single operator made the dogs more reliable in the field. If Rex only responded to me, there was no risk of him being commanded by enemy forces or confused by multiple handlers. He was bonded to my voice, my scent, my specific commands. It made him incredibly effective. It also made him your weapon, Thompson observed quietly. Sarah flinched but didn't deny it. "Yes, and I was good at it." Sargent was the star of the program. By the time he was 18 months old, he could clear a building faster than a 4-man team. He could identify hostile targets with 98% accuracy. He saved my life during training exercises more times than I can count. "So what went wrong?" Garrett asked. "Why aren't you still in the program?" The question hung in the air. Sarah's hand tightened on Rex's fur, and the dog whined softly, sensing her distress. "Because I learned what they were really going to use the dogs for," she said finally. 2 years into the program, I was called into a briefing with the Sentinel Dynamics project lead, a man named Colonel Marcus Brennan. He was retired Army, working as a private contractor, and he had political connections that went all the way to the Pentagon. She stood abruptly, unable to sit still anymore, and walked to the window overlooking the training facility. Rex immediately rose and followed, maintaining his position at her left side. Brennan told me that K9 TAC had been a proof of concept. The real goal was to mass-produce these dogs and sell the training protocols to both U.S. military and allied foreign forces. But more than that, Sentinel Dynamics had contracts with private military companies, mercenary groups operating in conflict zones with minimal oversight. They wanted to weaponize the dogs for profit, Dr. Chin said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Exactly. Brennan showed me proposals for deploying K9 TSC graduates in Yemen, Syria, and Sub-Saharan Africa, not in support of U.S. operations, but for whoever could pay Sentinel Dynamics' fee. He talked about the dogs like they were products, assets to be sold to the highest bidder. And when I objected, when I said that wasn't what I'd signed up for, he reminded me that I'd signed an NDA and that everything about K9 TAC was classified." "What did you do?" Garrett asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "I went to my commanding officer, Captain Elizabeth Reeves. She was regular Army, not part of Sentinel Dynamics, and I thought she could help. I was wrong." Sarah's voice cracked. 2 days after I reported the conversation with Brennan, I was pulled from the program. They told me I was being transferred stateside due to performance issues. They separated me from Sargent immediately, just walked me out of the kennel one day, and told me I wouldn't be seeing him again. And they transferred Rex, Sargent, to the Navy program, Thompson said. "Not directly. According to the database entry I saw, Sargent went through 2 other facilities first, a private training center in Virginia, then a Department of Defense contractor facility in Maryland. Each time, the report said the same thing: aggressive, uncontrollable, dangerous. They were trying to retrain him to accept other handlers, but he was doing exactly what I taught him to do: trust no one." Dr. Chin tapped her pen against her notepad. "Ms. Mitchell, from a behavioral perspective, what you're describing is a dog that was deliberately traumatized. You created an extreme dependency relationship and then broke it. The psychological damage." "I know," Sarah interrupted, her voice breaking. "I know what I did to him. I've spent 2 years trying to forget, try to move on with my life. I got discharged from the Army with an other than honorable classification after I continued trying to report Sentinel Dynamics through official channels. No one wanted to hear it. The program was classified, I'd signed NDAs, and I had no proof that would hold up in any investigation. She turned back to face them, and Garrett could see tears streaming down her face. I tried to find Sargent. I made calls, submitted FOIA requests, even hired a lawyer. Every door was slammed in my face. Then 3 months ago, I got a job as a database administrator for a DoD contractor. Different company, completely unrelated to Sentinel Dynamics. I have low-level access to various military databases, and I've been searching for any mention of Sargent whenever I could. When I saw the decommission request from Coronado yesterday, I drove straight to the night from Phoenix. 15 hours, Master Chief. I couldn't let him die because of what I turned him into. The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft sound of Rex's panting. Garrett studied the woman before him, exhausted, guilt-ridden but determined. Everything she'd told him explained the unexplainable. Why Rex had been untrainable, why his aggression was so controlled and tactical, why he'd only responded to Sarah's voice. "This is beyond my authority," Garrett said finally. "I need to kick this upstairs to Admiral Hutchins, and probably to Naval Intelligence. If what you're saying about Sentinel Dynamics is true, there's serious legal and ethical issues involved." "I don't care about Sentinel Dynamics anymore," Sarah said fiercely. "I just want Sargent. He's not a weapon, Master Chief. He's a dog who was manipulated and abused by a system that saw him as a commodity. If there's any way at all, that I can take him and give him the life he deserves, that's all I want." "That's not going to be simple," Thompson interjected. "Rex Sargent is technically Navy property. There are regulations about the disposition of military working dogs." "I know the regulations," Sarah shot back. "Military working dogs can be adopted by their handlers when they're retired or deemed unsuitable for service. I was his handler. I'm asking for that right." Garrett held up a hand. "It's more complicated than that, Ms. Mitchell. You're not currently military. Sargent has passed through multiple facilities since your time with him, and he's considered dangerous. Plus, there's a classified nature of his original training. This is going to require paperwork, authorization, and time." "How much time?" "I don't know. Days at minimum, possibly weeks. And that's assuming Admiral Hutchins doesn't decide that the security issues outweigh everything else." Sarah's face crumpled. "Master Chief, I can't leave him again. You didn't see what he was like when they separated us. He was—" She broke off, kneeling beside Rex and wrapping her arms around him. The dog pressed against her, sensing her distress. Dr. Chen spoke up, her clinical tone softened by empathy. "Master Chief, from a behavioral standpoint, separating them again would be cruel to the animal and potentially dangerous. We've just witnessed a perfect demonstration of handler bonding. If Ms. Mitchell leaves and Rex returns to his previous state, we'll be right back where we started. Only now we know there's a solution, and we're not using it." Garrett considered this, running through regulations and protocols in his mind. He thought about Admiral Hutchins, who valued results over rigid adherence to rules. He thought about the 6 months of failed rehabilitation, the injured handlers, the resources wasted. And he thought about the dog sitting calmly at Sarah's side, transformed from aggressive threat to loyal companion in the span of minutes. "Here's what I can do," he said finally. "I can designate you as a temporary civilian handler consultant while we sort out the formal arrangements. You'll need to stay on base. You'll be supervised at all times, and you'll need to help us develop a protocol for managing Sargent that doesn't require your constant presence." Sarah looked up, hope breaking through her exhaustion. "You mean I can stay with him?" "Temporarily. And it comes with conditions. You work with Dr. Chun to assess Sargent's psychological state. You provide detailed documentation of your training methods. You cooperate fully with any investigation into K9, TAC, and Sentinel Dynamics. And most importantly, you prove to me that you can help Sargent become stable enough to function without creating a security risk." "I can do that. I'll do whatever it takes." Thompson worked with logistics to set up quarters for Ms. Mitchell in the visitors' building. She's not to leave the base without authorization, and Sergeant stays in his kennel when she's not directly supervising him. Dr. Chun, I want a full behavioral assessment by end of day tomorrow. And Ms. Mitchell, you're going to tell me everything, and I mean everything, about K9 TAC and how you train Sergeant. Yes, sir. Thank you, Master Chief. As Thompson left to make arrangements and Dr. Chin began gathering her materials, Garrett watched Sarah with the dog. Rex had rolled onto his back, allowing Sarah to rub his belly, his tail wagging lazily. It was a behavior of a pet, not a weapon. But Garrett knew better than to be deceived by appearances. Ms. Mitchell, he said quietly, one more thing. She looked up, still scratching Rex's stomach. You said Sentinel Dynamics has political connections. If this becomes an official investigation, there may be pressure to shut it down. People with power tend to protect their interests. Are you prepared for that? Sarah's expression hardened, and Garrett saw a glimpse of the soldier she'd once been. Master Chief, they took everything from me. My career, my reputation, my integrity. They turned a good program into something corrupt and then tried to silence me when I objected. The only thing I have left is Sergeant and the chance to make this right. So yes, I'm prepared. They can throw whatever they want at me. I'm not backing down this time. Garrett nodded slowly. Good, because I have a feeling things are about to get complicated. He had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. As the sun set over Coronado, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah sat outside Kennel 47 with Rex lying beside her. The other handlers had gradually approached throughout the afternoon, drawn by curiosity and disbelief at the transformation. They watched Sarah put Rex through commands, seeing his perfect obedience, witnessed a bond that defied every training protocol they knew. Petty Officer Thompson had been the first to ask the question everyone was thinking. How do we explain this to the other handlers? How do we explain that this dog isn't broken? He's just loyal to someone we took him away from. Sarah hadn't had an answer then, and she didn't have one now. But as she sat in the cooling evening air with Rex's head resting on her lap, she made herself a promise. She would find a way to give him the life he deserved, free from the violence and manipulation of K9 TAC. She would expose what Sentinel Dynamics had done, no matter the cost. And she would never, ever let anyone separate them again. Inside the administrative building, Master Chief Garrett was on a secure line with Admiral Hutchins, providing a preliminary report. The Admiral's questions were sharp and pointed, and Garrett could hear the concern in his superior's voice. By the time he hung up, Garrett had authorization to proceed with the temporary arrangement, but also a warning that naval intelligence would be involved by morning. The wheels were now in motion, and there would be no stopping them. The morning briefing room at Naval Base Coronado was crowded. Master Chief Garrett stood at the front, facing a panel that included Admiral Robert Hutchins, two representatives from Naval Intelligence, Commander Lisa Patterson and Lieutenant James Wade, and Captain Elizabeth Reeves, the Army officer who had been Sarah's commanding officer during K9 TAC. Reeves' presence had been a surprise. When Sarah had been brought in an hour earlier and saw her former CO sitting at the conference table, the color had drained from her face. Rex, sensing her distress, had immediately moved to position himself between Sarah and the door, his body tense despite the downstay command she'd given. Now, as Garrett presented his report, Sarah sat to his right with Rex lying at her feet. Dr. Chin sat beside her, and Thompson stood near the back of the room, his arms crossed and his expression wary. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. And in conclusion, Garrett was saying, K9 Rex, originally designated Sergeant in the K9 TAC program, has demonstrated perfect handler compliance with Specialist Mitchell. His previous behavioral issues appear to have been entirely the result of separation from his original handler and the extreme bonding protocols used in his initial training. Admiral Hutchins, a silver-haired man in his early 60s with sharp blue eyes, leaned back in his chair. Master Chief, what you're describing sounds like a dog that's essentially useless to the Navy. If he only responds to a former Army specialist who's no longer in active service, what value does he have to our K9 program? Before Garrett could respond, Sarah spoke up. Admiral, with respect, Sergeant isn't useless. He's specialized. His training makes him one of the most capable tactical K-9s ever produced. The problem isn't his abilities. It's the fact that those abilities were designed to function within a specific handler relationship. Commander Patterson, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, fixed Sarah with an assessing gaze. Specialist Mitchell, or should I say Ms. Mitchell, since you're no longer in service, we've been reviewing the limited information available about K-9 TAC. The program was shut down 18 months ago amid allegations of contract irregularities and ethical violations. Yet you're sitting here telling us that the training protocols were successful. That seems contradictory. The training protocols were successful, ma'am, Sarah replied carefully. That's why they were dangerous. Sentinel Dynamics proved that they could create K-9s with extraordinary capabilities, but they also proved they were willing to sell those capabilities to anyone who could pay, with no regard for oversight or accountability. Captain Reeves finally spoke, her voice controlled but with an edge of steel underneath. Specialist Mitchell, you and I need to have a conversation about your decision to go around the chain of command and make allegations against a DoD contractor without substantial proof. You understand that your actions resulted in the termination of a program that had cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Sarah's hands clenched on the table, but her voice remained steady. Captain, with respect, I went through the proper channels. I reported my concerns to you. When that went nowhere, I submitted formal complaints through the Inspector General's office. I followed procedure, and I was ignored. The program wasn't terminated because of my allegations. It was terminated because Sentinel Dynamics contract violations finally became too obvious to ignore. That's enough, Admiral Hutchins interrupted, raising a hand. Captain Reeves, I appreciate the Army's interest in this matter, but the immediate question before us is what the Navy does with this animal and Ms. Mitchell's claims about his training. Commander Patterson, what does naval intelligence make of all this? Patterson opened a folder, scanning documents quickly. Admiral, we spent the past 24 hours reviewing everything we could access about K-9 TAC. Much of the program documentation has been classified or destroyed, but we did find several troubling indicators. Financial records show that Sentinel Dynamics received over $15 million in program funding, yet only 12 dogs were ever deployed for evaluation. That's more than $1 million per animal, well above standard military working dog programs. Where did the rest of the money go? Thompson asked from the back of the room. That's what we'd like to know, Lieutenant Wade answered. He was younger than Patterson, probably in his early 30s, with the intense focus of someone who'd built a career on uncovering secrets. We also found evidence that Sentinel Dynamics maintained contracts with 3 private military companies operating in conflict zones. The contracts are heavily redacted, but they make reference to K-9 tactical support units. So Ms. Mitchell's allegations about selling the dogs may have merit. Admiral Hutchins concluded. It appears so, sir. However, proving it and taking action against Sentinel Dynamics are different matters. The company has powerful supporters, and the program's classified nature makes it difficult to pursue without exposing sensitive information. Sarah leaned forward. Admiral, I'm not asking you to take on Sentinel Dynamics. I'm just asking for the chance to give Sergeant the life he deserves. Let me adopt him. I can handle him. I can keep him safe, and he'll never be a threat to anyone as long as he's with me. Captain Reeves shook her head. It's not that simple, Specialist. You sign non-disclosure agreements that extend beyond your service. Taking possession of an animal trained in classified protocols could be considered a breach of national security. That's absurd, Dr. Chin interjected, speaking for the first time. We're talking about a dog, not a weapon system. And from a psychological standpoint, this animal has been traumatized by exactly the kind of thinking that treats him as equipment rather than a living being. He needs stability, and Ms. Mitchell is the only person who can provide that. Dr. Chin raises a valid point, Admiral Hutchins said. Commander Patterson, is there a legitimate security concern here, or are we dealing with bureaucratic inertia? Patterson considered carefully. Sir, I would say there's a spectrum of concern. On one end, yes, K-9 Rex was trained in advanced tactical protocols that could theoretically be reverse-engineered or exposed. On the other end, He's a dog who's been separated from his handler for 2 years and has been deemed unsuitable for military service by multiple facilities. The security risk seems minimal compared to practical problems of managing him. Unless Sentinel Dynamics sees him as a liability, Lieutenant Wade added quietly. The room went silent. Sarah's face paled. What do you mean? Wade glanced at Patterson, who nodded for him to continue. Ms. Mitchell, you've made yourself visible by coming here. You've connected yourself to the K-9 TAC program again, and you've indicated your willingness to talk about what happened. If Sentinel Dynamics views you as a threat to their operations or reputation, they might take steps to protect their interests. Are you suggesting they try to harm her? Garrett demanded. I'm suggesting that private military contractors have been known to play hardball when their multimillion-dollar operations are threatened. Wade replied, especially contractors with political connections and a vested interest in keeping certain programs quiet. Sarah stood abruptly, and Rex immediately rose with her, positioning himself protectively at her side. I don't care if they come after me. I've been living with this guilt for 2 years, knowing what they turned Sergeant into and what they plan to do with the program. If speaking out puts me at risk, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Admiral Hutchins studied her intently. Sit down, Ms. Mitchell. When she complied, he continued, I admire your courage, but bravery without strategy is foolishness. If we're going to address the situation properly, we need to be smart about it. What do you propose, Admiral? Captain Reeves asked. First, we legitimize Ms. Mitchell's presence here. Master Chief Garrett's designation of her as a temporary civilian consultant was appropriate, but we're going to formalize it. Ms. Mitchell, how would you feel about a contract position with the Navy as AK-9 behavioral specialist? Sarah blinked in surprise. Sir, you have unique expertise with this animal and apparently with advanced K-9 tactical training. We could use that expertise, and it gives you official status that makes you harder for Sentinel Dynamics to target. Commander Patterson, can Naval Intelligence support that arrangement? Patterson nodded slowly. We can, sir. In fact, it might give us leverage. If Ms. Mitchell is operating under Navy authority, we can justify providing her with certain protections. And it puts her in a position where she can provide information about K-9 TAC as part of her official duties rather than as a potential security breach. I like it, Lieutenant Wade agreed. It changes a narrative from disgruntled former soldier making allegations to Navy consultant providing expert testimony. Captain Reeves looked less convinced. Admiral, the Army may have objections to one of our former personnel working with the Navy on a program that originated in our service branch. Then the Army should have listened to her concerns when she raised them through proper channels. Hutchins replied bluntly, Captain, no disrespect intended, but this dog ended up in Navy custody because multiple facilities couldn't handle him. That makes him our problem to solve. If Ms. Mitchell can help us solve it, I'm going to take advantage of that. Garrett watched Sarah's expression shift from surprise to cautious hope. Admiral, what about the adoption question? Ms. Mitchell wants to take permanent custody of Rex. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. First, I want to see this animal in action. Ms. Mitchell, can you demonstrate his capabilities? I want to understand what we're dealing with. Sarah nodded. Yes, sir. When would you like to see him? Right now. Everyone to the training facility. Let's see what $1 million dog can do. 20 minutes later, the group stood at the edge of the K-9 facility's main training area. The space was designed for versatility, obstacle courses, simulated building structures, detection training setups, and open areas for obedience work. Several handlers had paused their training sessions to watch, word having spread that something unusual was happening. Sarah stood in the center of the open area with Rex at her left side in a perfect heel position. She'd changed into borrowed ACUs that Thompson had found for her, and with a military uniform and her straight-back posture, she looked every inch the capable K-9 handler she'd once been. Admiral, she called out, with your permission, I'll demonstrate basic obedience first, then move to tactical commands. Proceed, Hutchins replied. What followed was a masterclass in K-9 handling. Sarah put Rex through a series of commands that showcased his training. Perfect heel work as they moved through the course at various speeds, ins and downs from a full run, recalls from distances that tested his obedience to the limit. Every command was executed flawlessly, and the dog's focus on Sarah was absolute. Jesus, Thompson muttered to Garrett. I've never seen anything like that. Neither have I, Garrett admitted, but it was a tactical demonstration that truly impressed the observers. Sarah directed Rex through a simulated building clearing exercise, using hand signals and whisper commands that sent the dog racing ahead to check rooms, identify threat positions marked by training dummies, and return her side for the next command. His movements were fluid, intelligent, and precise. Now watch this, Sarah said loudly enough for the observers to hear. She pointed to a training dummy positioned 50 yards away, partially concealed behind a barrier. Sergeant, watch. Rex's entire body went still, his eyes locked on the target. Sergeant, hold. For 30 seconds, the dog didn't move. He barely seemed to breathe. His focus was so intense that several of the watching handlers shifted uncomfortably. Sergeant, clear. Rex exploded into motion, covering the distance in seconds. He hit the dummy with controlled force, his teeth clamping onto the padded arm area in a perfect bite. He held for 3 seconds, then released on Sarah's command and immediately returned to her side. The entire sequence had taken less than a minute, but everyone present understood they'd witnessed something extraordinary. This wasn't a standard military working dog. This was something else entirely. Admiral Hutchins walked down to where Sarah stood with Rex. The dog tracked his movement but showed no aggression, apparently recognizing that the Admiral posed no threat to Sarah. How many dogs did K9 TAC produce like this? Hutchins asked. 15 started the program, sir. 8 completed it. Sergeant was the most successful. And where are the other 7? Sarah's expression darkened. I don't know, sir. After I was removed from the program, I lost track of them. According to the database entries I found, 3 were transferred to private military contractors, 2 went to federal agencies with redacted destinations, and 2 were listed as disposed of. Disposed of, Dr. Chen repeated, her voice heavy with meaning. Euphemism for euthanized? I believe so, ma'am. They were the dogs that showed the most aggression and couldn't be controlled even by their original handlers. The program considered them failures. Lieutenant Wade had been taking notes throughout the demonstration. Ms. Mitchell, could any of those dogs be operational right now? Being used by private military companies or other entities? It's possible, sir. The training we gave them doesn't fade. If they're being handled properly and maintained in the field, they could be operational indefinitely. That's a hell of a security concern, Commander Patterson observed. We got potentially 3 highly trained tactical K9s in the hands of private contractors with no oversight. Admiral Hutchins nodded grimly. Commander, I want Naval Intelligence to track down every K9 TAC graduate. Find out where they are, who has them, and what they're being used for. If we find evidence of misuse, we bring it to the DoD Inspector General. Lieutenant Wade, work with Ms. Mitchell to document everything she knows about the program. I want a comprehensive report on my desk in 72 hours. Yes, sir, they replied in unison. Hutchins turned back to Sarah. Ms. Mitchell, you convinced me that Rex, Sergeant, is a valuable asset and that you're essential to managing him. I'm approving a 6-month contract for you as AK-9 behavioral specialist, with focus on developing protocols that might allow him to work with other handlers. If that proves impossible, we'll revisit the adoption question. Fair enough. Sarah's eyes glistened with tears. More than fair, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This arrangement comes with conditions. You're going to help us understand everything about K9 TAC. You're going to work with Dr. Chen to document Sergeant's psychological state and develop a rehabilitation plan. And you're going to accept that there are people who won't be happy about you speaking up. Naval Intelligence will provide what protection they can, but you need to be smart and careful. Understood? Yes, sir. As the group dispersed, Sarah remained in the training area with Rex, processing everything that had just happened. 6 months. She had 6 months to prove that Sergeant could have a life beyond K9 TAC, beyond being a weapon. 6 months to build a case for taking him home permanently. Thompson approached carefully, not wanting to intrude. Hey, that was incredible. I've never seen handling like that. Sarah smiled weakly. Thanks. It's what we did every day for 2 years. It becomes second nature. Can I ask you something? When she nodded, he continued. Do you think you can really rehabilitate him? Teach him to trust other people? Sarah looked down at Rex, who gazed back at her with those unsettling amber eyes. I don't know, petty officer. Honestly, I don't know if we should. Part of what makes Sergeant who he is that single-minded focus and loyalty. If we break that, if we make him trust everyone, do we lose what makes him special? Or do we give him the chance to be a normal dog? Thompson suggested gently. Maybe. I just don't know if normal is in his vocabulary anymore. K-9, TAC made sure of that. As the California sun climbed higher in the sky, Sarah led Rex back to his kennel, though now it felt less like a prison and more like a temporary residence. She had work to do, reports to write, and protocols to develop, but more than that, she had hope. For the first time in 2 years, she believed there might be a way forward for both of them. What she didn't know was that 20 miles away, in an unmarked office in downtown San Diego, Colonel Marcus Brennan was receiving a report about Sarah Mitchell's reappearance, and he was not pleased. The conversation that followed would set in motion events that would test Sarah's resolve, the Navy's commitment to protecting its people, and Sergeant's training in ways none of them could anticipate. The storm was coming. They just didn't know it yet. The anonymous email arrived in Commander Lisa Patterson's inbox at 0347 hours, routed through multiple servers and bearing no identifiable signature. The message was brief. Sarah Mitchell is a security risk. K-9, TAC protocols cannot be exposed. Recommend immediate termination of civilian consultant contract and transfer of Asset 47 to 2847 to designated facility. This is not a request. Patterson had been working late, reviewing the growing file on Sentinel Dynamics and K-9 TAC. When the email appeared, she immediately forwarded it to Lieutenant Wade and Master Chief Garrett, then contacted Base Security to increase surveillance around Sarah Mitchell's quarters. By 0600 hours, an emergency meeting was convened in Admiral Hutchins' office. The early morning light streaming through the windows did little to dispel the dark mood in the room. This is an explicit threat, Lieutenant Wade stated, displaying the email on a tablet for everyone to see. The phrasing, not a request, suggests the center has authority and expects compliance. Or wants us to think they have authority, Admiral Hutchins countered. Commander Patterson, what's your read? Sir, the email originated from an IP address registered to a DoD contractor facility in Virginia. It was routed through their system, which means whoever sent it has legitimate access to DoD networks. The language pattern matches communications we've seen from former military officers, specifically those working in private sector security. Brennan, Sarah said quietly from her seat at the conference table. Rex lay at her feet, and she'd been called in at 0530 hours without explanation. Seeing the email had confirmed her worst fears. Colonel Marcus Brennan was the Sentinel Dynamics project lead for K-9 TAC. This sounded exactly like how he operates. Make threats sound like official orders, blur the lines between legitimate authority and private interests. Master Chief Garrett leaned forward. Admiral, if this is Sentinel Dynamics trying to intimidate us, we need to push back hard. They don't have authority over Navy operations. No, they don't, Hutchins agreed. But they do have political connections, and we need to be careful about how we respond. Commander Patterson, where are we on tracking the other K-9 TAC dogs? Patterson pulled up files on her laptop. Sir, we've located 5 of the 8 K-9 TAC graduates. 3 are confirmed with private military contractors, 1 in Yemen, 1 in Nigeria, and 1 unaccounted for, but last reported in Iraq. 2 are with federal agencies, 1 with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, 1 with the Department of Homeland Security. That leaves 3 unaccounted for, including the 2 listed as disposed of. And Rex, Lieutenant Wade added. Makes 8. The question is whether Sentinel Dynamics sees Rex as a threat because of what he represents or because they want to recover their asset. Dr. Chin observed. She'd been included in the meeting at Sarah's request, having spent the previous day conducting comprehensive behavioral assessments of both Sarah and Rex. Both, Sarah said firmly. Brennan doesn't like loose ends, and Sargent is the best example of what K-9 TAC could produce. If I'm working with the Navy and documenting his training, that's information Sentinel Dynamics can't control. They'll want him back, and they'll want me silenced. Admiral Hutchins studied Sarah intently. Ms. Mitchell, I want you to understand something. The Navy doesn't respond well to threats, especially threats against people under our protection. But I need to know right now, are you committed to seeing this through? Because if we push back against Sentinel Dynamics, this situation is going to escalate. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Sir, I've been running from this for 2 years. I lost my career, my reputation, and my integrity trying to do the right thing. I'm not running anymore. Whatever Sentinel Dynamics throws at us, I'm ready. Then we move forward, Hutchins decided. Commander Patterson, I want a formal investigation open into Sentinel Dynamics contracts and their use of K-9 TAC assets. Coordinate with the DoD Inspector General. Lieutenant Wade, work with base security to ensure Ms. Mitchell and Rex are protected. Master Chief Garrett, you're authorized to implement whatever security measures you deem necessary at the K-9 facility. There's something else, Admiral, Wade interjected. I've been reviewing the financial records we obtained. Sentinel Dynamics received $15 million in program funding, but their expenses only account for about $8 million. The remaining $7 million is unaccounted for. Money laundering? Thompson asked. He'd been standing quietly by the door, but stepped forward now. Possibly. Or it could be diverted to other operations. Private military contractors often use one program to fund others, especially when operating in gray areas of the law. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. It's a text from an unknown number. It says, "You were warned. Check Kennel 47. Everyone moved at once." Garrett, Thompson, and 2 armed security personnel sprinted from the room, with Sarah and Rex close behind. Admiral Hutchins grabbed the phone on his desk, alerting base security to a potential security breach at the K-9 facility. They covered the distance to the facility in minutes, but it felt like hours. Sarah's heart pounded as she ran, Rex keeping perfect pace at her side, despite the chaos. Please, she thought, please let him be okay. Then she realized the absurdity. Rex was with her. The text was a misdirection, or a threat against something else. They burst into the K-9 facility to find handlers gathered around Kennel 47, their faces grim. The kennel door stood open, and inside, another German shepherd lay on the ground, sedated but breathing. The dog was similar enough to Rex that in dim light, they could be mistaken for each other. What the hell? Garrett demanded. One of the handlers, a young woman named Petty Officer Garcia, stepped forward. Master Chief, I was doing the morning check when I found this dog in Kennel 47. It's not Rex. Different markings, different ID tag. Somebody switched them. Sarah knelt beside the sedated dog, examining him carefully. This is one of the K-9 TAC graduates, she said, her voice shaking. This is Bear. He was in the program with Sargent. I recognize his markings. She checked the dog's mouth, finding a small tattoo on the inner lip. ID tag is fake, but the tattoo is real. K-9 TAC 004. That's Bear. Where's our Rex? Thompson asked urgently, then realized his mistake. I mean, where did they take the decoy? They didn't take anything, Sarah realized. This is a message. They're showing us they can access the facility, that they know our security protocols, and that they have other K-9 TAC dogs they can deploy. This is Sentinel Dynamics demonstrating their reach. Lieutenant Wade was already on his phone, pulling up security footage. Master Chief, you need to see this. He showed them footage from 0200 hours, a figure in Navy uniform approaching Kennel 47. Open it with what appear to be legitimate access credentials, removing Rex's decoy, which they've been using for training purposes while Rex stayed with Sarah, and replacing it with the sedated Bear. The person's face was obscured by the camera angle, but the movements were professional, practiced. They have someone on the inside, Garrett said grimly. Someone with access and credentials. Admiral Hutchins arrived moments later, breathing hard from the run, but maintaining his command presence. He surveyed the scene, his jaw tight. Secure that dog. I want him examined by our vet and held in isolation. Lock down this facility. No one in or out without my explicit authorization. And someone get me base security and naval intelligence on the phone right now. As personnel scrambled to follow orders, Sarah remained kneeling beside Bear, her hand resting on his sedated form. Rex sat beside her, his body tense, and Sarah realized he recognized Bear. The two dogs had trained together as puppies, and despite 2 years of separation, Rex remembered. "Sarah," Dr. Chin said gently, "we need to move you to a secure location. If they can access the facility this easily, you're not safe here." "No," Sarah said, standing. "Running is exactly what they want. If I hide, they win. Admiral, I want to offer myself as bait." "Absolutely not," Hutchins snapped. "You're a civilian consultant, not an operator. With respect, sir, I was a military police specialist trained by K9 TAC. I know how they think, how they operate. And I have something they want. Sergeant, if we use that to draw them out, we can catch whoever is working with Sentinel Dynamics and prove they're engaging in illegal operations on U.S. military property." Commander Patterson, who'd arrived during the commotion, shook her head. "It's too dangerous. We don't know how many people Sentinel Dynamics has infiltrated or what resources they're willing to deploy." "That's exactly why we need to act," Sarah argued. "Every hour we wait, they're planning their next move. Bear's presence here proves they have operational K9s they can deploy. What if next time it's not just a message? What if they decide to eliminate the threat permanently?" The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Lieutenant Wade broke it by asking the tactical question, "What did you have in mind?" Sarah took a deep breath, formulating her plan as she spoke. "We announced that I'm transferring Sergeant to a remote training facility for advanced behavioral work. We make it public, base announcements, official documentation, the works. Sentinel Dynamics will see it as an opportunity to intercept us during the transfer. We set up a control route, limited exposure points, and naval intelligence provides surveillance and support. When they make their move, you grab them. That's essentially offer yourself up as a target," Dr. Chin protested. "I'm already a target. This just puts the confrontation on our terms instead of theirs." Master Chief Garrett looked at Admiral Hutchins. "Sir, it could work. If we coordinate with base security and naval intelligence, we can create a controlled environment that looks vulnerable but is actually a trap." Hutchins was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. Finally, he nodded. "Commander Patterson, you have operational authority. Work with Lieutenant Wade to set up the operation. Master Chief, you coordinate security for the actual facility. Ms. Mitchell, you follow orders exactly as given, or this ends immediately." "Understood." "Yes, sir." "Good. We move in 24 hours. That gives us time to set up surveillance, brief personnel, and prepare contingencies. Commander, make this airtight. I don't want to lose our consultant or our K9 because we got outmaneuvered by a private contractor with delusions of authority." The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. Commander Patterson assembled a team of naval intelligence personnel experienced in counter-surveillance and tactical operations. Lieutenant Wade coordinated with base security to identify every person with access credentials to the K9 facility, flagging anyone with connections to defense contractors or suspicious activity patterns. Master Chief Garrett worked with the K9 handlers to create a convincing transfer scenario while quietly securing Rex and Sarah in a protected location. Sarah spent the time working with Dr. Chun to document everything she knew about K9, TAC, training protocols, handler relationships, Sentinel Dynamics operational procedures, and Colonel Brennan's methods. The resulting report was comprehensive and damning, providing evidence that would support a formal investigation if they could prove Sentinel Dynamics' illegal activities. Rex remained by Sarah's side throughout, sensing her tension but maintaining his training. She ran him through exercises to keep both of them sharp, and several times caught herself grateful for the years of bonding that had created such an unbreakable connection. Whatever happened in the next few days, she knew Rex would be with her, loyal to the end. The morning of the operation arrived with typical San Diego weather. Overcast skies, cool temperatures, and marine layer that wouldn't burn off until noon. The transfer was scheduled for 0900 hours, giving Sentinel Dynamics informant time to relay the information and coordinate a response. Sarah dressed in borrowed Navy utilities, checked her equipment, and met with Commander Patterson for a final briefing. The plan was straightforward. They would drive Rex in a standard military transport vehicle to a remote training facility 20 miles north of the base. The route would take them through areas with limited civilian presence, but multiple potential intercept points. Naval intelligence would have surveillance teams positioned along the route, with a rapid response force standing by to intervene at the first sign of trouble. Remember, Patterson instructed, your job is to be visible and vulnerable. You're not engaging any threats. The moment something happens, you take cover and let my people handle it. Clear, Sarah confirmed, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the passive role. At 0847 hours, Sarah walked Rex out to the transport vehicle under the watchful eyes of base personnel. She made a show of loading equipment, checking Rex's collar, and providing last-minute instructions to the driver, actually Lieutenant Wade in disguise. Master Chief Garrett stood nearby, playing his role as a concerned supervisor. You take care of that dog, Ms. Mitchell, Garrett said loudly enough for anyone listening to hear. He's valuable property, and we need him back in one piece. Will do, Master Chief, Sarah replied, climbing into the back of the vehicle with Rex. The vehicle pulled out at precisely 0900 hours, following the designated route north. Sarah sat in the back with Rex, her heart pounding, but her hands steady. Wade drove with practiced casualness, maintaining radio contact with Patterson's surveillance team through an encrypted channel. They made it 5 miles before the first surveillance team reported suspicious activity. Command, this is Overwatch 2. We have a dark SUV paralleling the transport on Highway 75. 2 occupants, driver male, passenger obscured. Vehicle is maintaining position approximately 200 meters back. Patterson's voice came to the radio, calm and controlled. Copy, Overwatch 2. All teams maintain positions. Let's see what they do. 3 miles later, as the transport vehicle approached a section of road bordered by undeveloped land and sparse vegetation, the SUV accelerated. It pulled alongside the transport, and Sarah caught a glimpse of the passenger, a hard-faced man in his 40s wearing civilian clothes but moving with military precision. They're making their move, Wade reported, his voice tight. The SUV swerved in front of the transport, forcing Wade to brake. 2 more vehicles, a pickup truck and a sedan, appeared from side roads, boxing them in. Men emerged from the vehicles, 6 in total, all moving with tactical efficiency. They weren't wearing uniforms, but their coordination and equipment screamed private military training. Naval intelligence, you're clear to engage, Patterson ordered over the radio. All units, go, go, go. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but felt like slow motion to Sarah. The surveillance teams revealed themselves, 4 vehicles and 12 naval intelligence personnel, supported by 8 base security officers in a rapid response vehicle. The Sentinel Dynamics operatives found themselves surrounded, outgunned, and caught in the open. Federal agents, drop your weapons and get on the ground. Most of the operatives complied immediately, recognizing they'd been caught in a trap. But the hard-faced man from the SUV reached for his sidearm, and Sarah saw the situation starting to deteriorate. Rex, sensing the threat, began to rise, a low growl building in his chest. Sergeant, downstay, Sarah commanded firmly. The dog dropped immediately, but his eyes never left the armed man. Sir, don't make this worse, Lieutenant Wade called out, stepping out of the driver's seat with his sidearm drawn, but pointed at the ground. You're surrounded by federal agents. Put the weapon down. For a moment, it seemed like the man would comply. Then his eyes found Sarah through the transport window, and recognition flashed across his face. You, he snarled. You should have stayed quiet. I was quiet for 2 years, Sarah called back, her voice carrying across the empty road. It didn't stop what you people did. It didn't protect Sergeant or the other dogs. And it didn't make the guilt go away. Put the weapon down. Commander Patterson had emerged from one of the surveillance vehicles, her sidearm trained on the man. This is your final warning. The man's hand twitched, and for a split second Sarah thought he would fire. But then his shoulders sagged, and he dropped the gun, raising his hands in surrender. Naval intelligence personnel moved in immediately, securing all 6 operatives and their vehicles. As the situation was secured, Sarah climbed out of the transport with Rex. Commander Patterson approached, her expression professional but with a hint of satisfaction. "Nice work, Ms. Mitchell. Your instincts about Sentinel Dynamics were right on target." "Who are they?" Sarah asked, gesturing to the detained operatives. "We'll find out during interrogation. But I'm willing to bet we'll find connections to Brennan and Sentinel Dynamics. This gives us the evidence we need to launch a formal investigation and bring criminal charges." Lieutenant Wade joined them, carrying a tablet displaying photos and documentation found in the SUV. "Command, you're going to want to see this. We found operational plans for kidnapping Ms. Mitchell, recovering K-9 Asset 47 to 2,847, and transporting both to a private facility in Nevada. They had equipment for sedating the dog, restraints for Ms. Mitchell, and authorization letters bearing Colonel Brennan's signature. That's kidnapping, assault on federal property, and about a dozen other charges," Patterson said with grim satisfaction. "They just handed us everything we need." Over the next several hours, as naval intelligence processed the detained operatives and secured evidence, the scope of Sentinel Dynamics' illegal operations became clear. The hard-faced man was identified as Marcus Reed, a former Army Ranger working as Sentinel Dynamics' head of security operations. His phone contained communications with Colonel Brennan, explicitly ordering the recovery of Rex and the elimination of the Mitchell problem. 2 of the other operatives, faced with federal charges and long prison sentences, agreed to cooperate with investigators. Their testimony revealed that Sentinel Dynamics had been using K-9 TAC assets in unauthorized operations across 3 continents, charging private clients up to $500,000 for tactical K-9 support. The missing $7 million from the program funding had been funneled into offshore accounts controlled by Brennan and 2 other Sentinel Dynamics executives. By evening, federal warrants had been issued for Colonel Brennan and his associates. The DoD Inspector General announced a comprehensive investigation into Sentinel Dynamics operations, and several members of Congress who had supported the company's contracts suddenly found themselves distancing from the scandal. Sarah sat in Admiral Hutchins' office, exhausted but relieved, with Rex lying at her feet. Master Chief Garrett, Commander Patterson, Lieutenant Wade, Dr. Chin, and Petty Officer Thompson were also present. Everyone who had played a role in exposing Sentinel Dynamics. "Ms. Mitchell," Admiral Hutchins began, "what you did today took considerable courage. You put yourself at risk to expose corruption and protect not just Rex, but all the K-9s exploited by that program." "I just want to make things right, sir," Sarah replied quietly. "You did more than that. The evidence we've gathered will shut down Sentinel Dynamics' military contracts and likely result in criminal prosecutions. More importantly, we're going to recover the other K-9 TAC graduates and ensure they're placed in appropriate situations where they can't be exploited." "What about Bear?" Sarah asked. "The dog they left in Sergeant's kennel?" Dr. Chin answered, "He's stable and recovering from the sedation. His psychological profile is similar to Rex's. Extremely well-trained but traumatized by the program. With your permission, I'd like to work with you to develop rehabilitation protocols for him and any other K-9 TAC graduates we recover." Sarah nodded. "I'd be honored, ma'am." Admiral Hutchins leaned back in his chair. "Now, let's talk about your future, Ms. Mitchell and Rex's. Your 6-month contract as a K-9 behavioral specialist stands, and based on what I've seen, I'm inclined to make it permanent if you're interested. The Navy could use your expertise in working with specialized K-9s. And as for Rex," Master Chief Garrett added, "I think we can all agree that he's unsuitable for standard military service. His training and bonding protocols make him a one-handler dog, and that handler is you. I'm recommending immediate retirement and adoption to his original handler." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Master Chief, Don't thank me yet," Garrett interrupted with a slight smile. "Adopting a military working dog is a serious responsibility, especially one with Rex's background. You'll need to maintain his training, ensure he's properly managed, and accept that he'll always be a specialized animal requiring careful handling. I understand, sir, and I accept. Then consider it done. We'll process the paperwork and have it finalized within the week. As the meeting adjourned and everyone began to leave, Thompson approached Sarah. So what's next for you two? Sarah looked down at Rex, who gazed back at her with those distinctive amber eyes. First, we're going to sleep for about 24 hours straight. Then, I think we're going to find a place with a big yard, far from military bases and defense contractors. Somewhere Sargent can just be a dog for a while. He deserves that, Thompson agreed. You both do. 2 weeks later, Sarah signed the final adoption papers in Master Chief Garrett's office. Rex, though she started calling him Sergeant again, his original name, sat patiently beside her, his official military working dog career concluded and his new life about to begin. The media coverage of the Sentinel Dynamics scandal had been extensive. Colonel Marcus Brennan had been arrested at his home in Virginia, along with 3 other executives. Their trial would take months, but the evidence was overwhelming. The military contractors who had been using K-9 TAC graduates in unauthorized operations faced their own legal problems. And Congress had launched hearings into oversight failures that had allowed the program to operate without adequate supervision. Of the 8 K-9 TAC graduates, 7 were eventually recovered. 3 came from private military contractors operating overseas, 2 from federal agencies who voluntarily surrendered them once the legal issues became clear, and 2 were found at a private training facility in Nevada where Sentinel Dynamics had been conducting unauthorized research. The 8th dog, originally listed as disposed of, remained unaccounted for, but Sarah hoped that someday, somehow, they might find him too. Bear, the dog left in Rex's kennel as a warning, was adopted by Petty Officer Thompson after intensive rehabilitation work with Dr. Chun and Sarah. The 2 dogs had occasional reunions, and while Bear would never reach Rex's level of training sophistication, he became a beloved companion and a therapy dog for veterans at a nearby VA hospital. Sarah accepted the Navy's offer of a permanent position as AK-9 behavioral specialist, but with the condition that she could work remotely from her new home in Colorado. She and Sargent, she couldn't quite think of him as Rex anymore, moved to a property outside Colorado Springs, with mountains visible from the porch and enough land for a dog to run. The nightmares didn't stop immediately. Both Sarah and Sargent carried the trauma of K-9 TAC, and there were nights when she woke to find him pacing the house, his amber eyes scanning for threats that weren't there. But slowly, over months and then years, the healing came. Sargent learned to trust again, not broadly, but with specific people who proved themselves patient and kind. He learned to play like a normal dog, though his version of play always carried a hint of his tactical training. And he learned to relax, lie in patches of sunlight on the porch, his head in Sarah's lap, finally at peace. Sarah's work at the Navy focused on developing ethical protocols for specialized K-9 training, ensuring that no other program could exploit dogs the way K-9 TAC had. She testified before Congress, contributed to policy reforms, and worked with Dr. Chin to publish research on the psychological effects of extreme bonding protocols on military working dogs. But her most important work happened in the quiet moments, teaching Sargent that not every stranger was a threat, that trust could be rebuilt, that the world held more kindness than cruelty. It was slow work, patient work, but it was the work that mattered most. On a crisp fall morning 3 years after the events at Naval Base Coronado, Sarah sat on her porch watching Sargent explore the property. He moved with the same predatory grace he'd always had, but now there was joy in his movements, not just tactical precision. He brought her a stick, dropping at her feet, with a tail wag that would have been impossible during his days in Kennel 47. "Good boy, Sargent," she said, throwing the stick across the yard. He raced after it with enthusiasm that had nothing to do with combat training and everything to do with being a dog who finally understood he was home. Her phone buzzed with a message from Master Chief Garrett. Saw the news about the Brennan sentencing. 20 years, all counts. Justice done. How are you and the wild K-9? Sarah smiled and typed back. We're good. Better than good. Finally found our peace. She set down the phone and called Sargent back to the porch. He came immediately, settling at her feet with his head resting on her knee. Sarah scratched behind his ears, feeling his contentment in the way his body relaxed against her. "No one in the U.S. Navy could control you," she said softly. "But that was never really the problem, was it? You just needed someone to understand that you weren't broken. You were exactly what they made you, and now we get to figure out who you can be when the war is over." Sargent's amber eyes gazed up at her with perfect trust, and for the first time since K-9 TSE, Sarah felt truly at peace. They had both been weapons, both been used, both been broken by a system that valued capability over humanity, but they had also both found their way back, together. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the mountains. Sarah and Sargent sat together in the warmth. Two survivors of a corrupt program, bound by loyalty that no amount of manipulation could break, and healed by time, patience, and the recognition that every being, human or canine, deserves dignity, respect, and the chance to choose peace over violence. It was, Sarah thought, the best command she'd ever given. Not an order to attack or defend, but simply permission to rest, to heal, and to be free.